And this is what is holding for us this morning. All right, let's just wait for it. My touch screen this morning is not working up. I hope you are. And you're watching this morning how it's actually frustrating me. So it's gone black on me. I'll try and also cajole it a bit to see what happens. I don't know what is really happening with it. There we go. Let's see if I'll revive it. Okay, so let me just give it another shot there if it can. So have you ever woken up in the morning where your touch screen is gone black, my auto cue has failed, the printer, I have no scripts. How do you expect me to read news? These are challenges of the morning. So I'll try and do it so cajole it a bit. Right? The frustration when you wake up in the morning and you find monkeys are all over. Monkey on the touch screen, monkey on my auto cue, monkey on my printer. So what we do is just head over now to our panelists who are here, who will be the saviors of a day. And you know what? This is salvation because it's all about the church. Well, I should call it the clergies to come and pray for my touch screen. Huh? I call Reverend Geoffrey Njenga, come and lay your hands here. I call upon Professor Kombo and Bishop Warari as well to come and lay hands on Ngaruiya this morning. Right? I hope these are some of the cases that sometimes you face when you're going to make presentation, maybe, and then technology fails you. Then how do you navigate it? Right? So this is a very ticklish situation that I'm in. So you don't have your scripts. I don't have my auto cue, and my touchscreen just decided today I'm going to make you look really bad. But anyway, we'd actually introduced that particular discussion earlier. Joining us, if you joined us at 6 o'clock, bang on time there. And we are focusing on church self-regulation. This debate has come to the fore, brought forth by Honorable Kigano, who is a member of parliament from Kangema, and has sparked a lot of reaction from different quarters of the church as far as that is concerned. And if you're joining us this morning, I may just want to, of course, introduce our panelists one more time so that you can get to know who we have in the studio this morning. We have Bishop John Warari from the Inter-Religious Council of Kenya and Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, EAKA. We do have with us as well Reverend Geoffrey Njenga, who is a corporate governance expert and also a clergy at the All Saints Cathedral. And we'll be looking at this also keenly with him. We have Professor James Kombo, who's the Vice Chancellor of Daystar University. And we do have with us as well David Ngaruiya. Professor David Ngaruiya is a lecturer at the International Leadership University. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
I look forward to hearing from you this morning. We wanted to get also a presentation from the Muslim community as well, but they, of course, sent their regrets, they couldn't really make it today. And also we wanted to hear from NCCK as well. And also we got regrets from one, of course, of the officials who couldn't make it, who's been taken ill this morning. But nonetheless, we continue the conversation at pace this morning. So I want to, first of all, lay the groundwork as we begin. I don't know if my director, Diana, already has my bites with me so that at least it can act as a segue so that we can hear what they have to say. Diana? Right, let's hear from one person that also spoke about this very loudly, I should say, on Sunday, and this is Honorable Musalia Mudavadi.
Let us propose and talk about those changes with the church or the religious leaders on the table. Let us not try to pontificate in this context and try and make rules without listening to them. This is absolutely essential.
So that was on Sunday, and we heard also from the clergy and the laity on that, and we want to hear from you as well. You can head over to a Twitter handle, which is AM Live NTV. And AM Live NTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20686, our SMS portal. Right. Of course, this is a debate that you've been following. We can begin with you, Bishop Warari, to just tell us, first of all, what was your reaction when you heard about this particular pronouncement from Honorable Kigano Of course, there is no bill yet. He intends, I don't know if he wants to raise a bill or he wants to move a motion. So there are two options that he's going to do. But we have the debate already in the public, and we have different reactions. So the question would be, maybe where to start is, we have the Interreligious Council of Kenya.
Yes.
We have the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya.
Right.
We have the National Council of Churches of Kenya. And many bodies that, of course, should act as a governing body.
Right.
I don't know what is happening also with the parachurch ministries as well. But the question will be, do you think we should have a self-governing body? And all these bodies that I've mentioned, are they dysfunctional? Why should we have another body?
Thank you so very much, and good morning, Kenya. We're very thankful for this opportunity that we can come and speak about what is involving the church. I would want to say that we have enough regulations. Debarl, for example, your touch screen has malfunctioned. That does not mean that we take the touch screen and throw it into the garbage. What we should do is to look at the reasons why the touch screen this morning has malfunctioned. And the same with the issue of little hiccups here and there.
Yes.
I would want to say that religious matters are very dynamic. And people have been coming up with ideas of how to add more regulations. But I think we have more than enough. We have the law of the land. We have the Societies Act. We have the umbrella bodies. Like, for example, I'm from Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, and we have our code of conduct. In fact, we have had a memorandum of understanding with the EACC. And so if you see one or two of our members misbehaving, I want to believe the best would be to go to that particular one. And of course, religion being dynamic, should we now and then look at it and look at the regulations? I would say yes. But to come up and kind of create some threat and kind of animosity between the state and religion, it should not be the way. We are actually in one house, and we should improve on what we have. So indeed, we have heard about the proposed bill, and the Evangelical Alliance last year but one came up with a religious bill, which we crafted, and we called our experts, and they helped us in crafting that bill, and we placed it in the hands of the Attorney General. We, of course, consulted with other religious bodies, including SUPKEM, including Hindu Council, and they were in agreement with this religious bill, but it is in the shelves. We are not hearing anything about it. So I want to believe, of course, there should be order. There should be regulations, but we have more than enough.
We have more than enough.
We have more than enough.
Right. Let's hear from Professor Kombo. Good morning.
Good morning, Debarl, and good morning, Kenya, as well. This is a heavy issue. Looking at it, I would come from the position that the regulations guiding whether registration or conduct and all that has always been in place. When you have a church and you take it through a registration process.
Yes.
That is subjecting it to regulations. I don't think there has ever been a time in this country when regulations or the idea of regulating the religious bodies did not happen. I think this has always been the case. I think what we should go to is the mischief. Is there a mischief somewhere? And what is it? I think that is where we should go. The conciliar bodies, such as IRC, such as the Evangelical Fellowship,
Alliance
such as
Kenya.
OIC, such as NCCK, these ones have always existed. They have existed to serve two broad purposes. One purpose is, of course, regulation. They have existed to provide an atmosphere and a space within which churches that are under them self-regulate, but they also have served as fellowship platforms, platforms where they would come and share their experiences, their frustrations, their joys, and things like those. So these have always happened. So what is the mischief? What is it that we want to do that we have not done? I think we need to put our fingers on that and be able to confidently then move forward, both church and the rest of the society, understanding very clearly that this or the other provide the reason, provide the basis upon which we must approach this thing in a different direction. So in my opinion, the matter is clearly on what is the mischief, what is the issue.
So you think there is a mischief?
I think there is.
All right, I don't know what Ngaruiya will tell us. Yeah, Professor Kombo thinks there is a dark underbelly to this. Yeah. What will be your thought?
I totally agree with him that there are better things that the church could do in some areas. But I think it's also important to understand the nature of the church. And I'll just mention one aspect at this time. The church is, by nature, a self-governing body. But it's a self-governing body that belongs to people who choose to be in it. It's not a coercive society.
Yes.
It's a society where people choose to belong. And they give their allegiance, to the church, recognizing who the head of the church is. And in our day and age, in a time of transparency, in a time of accountability, there are expectations of the church in society. And I think it is where, that is the place where things have gone wrong. Now, another aspect of course, of the church that we often forget about is that the church is supposed to be self-sustaining. And it is in the self-sustaining aspect where resources are talked about and where there is accountability on resources and on there's also accountability in terms of how the church is transforming society. And that's the area we need to examine, because it's also an area where the public is saying, we would like to know better what's going behind the scenes. But the mischief Prof. Kombo mentioned about comes under another aspect of the church, which is the self-theologizing aspect of the church. You see, the church ought to make the society a better place by taking issues, current issues, contemporary issues in society, and addressing them from a framework of Scripture and a value system on which we all agree. There may be diversities on the value system, but as far as those values are concerned, society agrees that this is good for us. And that is where the mischief is coming on. And I think there are specific mischiefs that we can actually point out.
Okay, all right. Let's hear from Reverend Geoffrey Njenga.
Well, thank you. I think the issue is to regulate or not to regulate. I would go for self-regulation because self-regulation comes from the heart. If I have determined to do something because I feel it in my heart, I will do it. However, I think we need to ask ourselves, why would anybody ever think that the church ought to be regulated or our behavior, mischief or no mischief? I think it is very easy to see when things are going wrong. If the church will point fingers at the thieving government ministers, and we know that we have thieving people in the church, I think to say that we are different, we cannot be regulated, I think is to be a little simplistic. I think there's no doubt, you know, people in this country do not steal because there are no rules. People do not steal because they don't have the constitution, we don't have all the other rules which come into play, simply because by nature, when people tend to extreme behavior, and I think there's a great need for people to be helped to understand that there is need for some form of control. And by the way, there's nothing new about regulation. Even in the Garden of Eden, which was ideal, there was an element of regulation, and to not do it, to not live by the rules given, led to a lot of trouble. The church is the heart of the nation, and you know, we think of the church as something out there. We do not often see the church as us, the people who go there on Sunday or whichever other day. And religion in the whole is the people themselves. Why do you think it is necessary to regulate? Because we can see the compromise. And it is not about writing very many rules, it is about being truthful and honest. I think we are faced with a situation where we have far too many splinter groups in the church, people who go to do everything they want to do. And I am not persuaded that the motivation is necessary, the ministry or the mission of the church. So I would want to see us embracing the state and sitting together, take this document, whoever has prepared it is neither here nor there, and look at it and see whether it adds value. If we have other rules, how does it come in?
All right, fantastic. Okay, I think that really sets the tone for the conversation this morning. And we want to also hear what you have prepared for us. You have the lectors there. You'll have a 5-minute piece of what you've prepared for us to talk to us. That's how we do it on the Leadership Forum. So it is just what you've told us, but now on a more broader perspective, what do you think and why do you think this issue is coming to the fore right now? You say there's a dark underbelly to it. Reverend Njenga says, yes, this is neither here nor there. We have also Ngaruiya alluding to the fact that, yes, I agree with Professor Kombo, there's a mischief to it. But if may ask also Bishop John Warari, we can see, yes, we have all these councils. You've mentioned the EAK, interreligious. Why do we need another body as well? Is it because these particular bodies are not really anchored in law? And that's why maybe they want the bodies to be anchored in law. Then how do we navigate that particular issue of anchoring these particular bodies in law so that they're effective, they have teeth, and we can say truly there is a legislative way that we can actually take as far as the council is concerned. So as it is right now, if it's not really anchored in law, then what? These are some of the issues that we want to hear from you this morning. Also, you can join the conversation. Please head over to our Twitter handle, which is AMLiveNTV. And AMLiveNTV is a profile name on Facebook and 20686, our SMS portal. Right, I just want to lay the ground. Geoffrey has been here, Ngaruiya, Professor Kombo, maybe for Bishop Warari. On Friday, I have always my bell. And my cards that today are missing as well. It seems today the devil just decided it's going to be on my case. Yeah, so we just want to lay the groundwork this morning. This is just to make sure we manage time, right? We'll give each of you 5 minutes to just be on the lectern, at least 6 minutes, I should say. And you can just talk to Kenyans and tell them why you think the church and self-regulation is a way or the way not to go. So you have your microphone there on the lectern, and you do have your camera facing you straight on. That is camera 3. So you look at that and speak to Kenyans. Of course, we have many other cameras in the studio, but feel free to talk to us. So we want just you to make your case for and against the church and self-regulation. Do you think this is the way to go? So 5 minutes each of you. Since I don't have my cards, I'm going to just raise my bell midway to just tell you, yes, you're halfway. So that should be 3 minutes. You have three minutes more. So don't get startled if I try and raise the bell. You think now you should be winding up. Just feel free. Once I ring the bell, then that will tell you you should be winding up. Is that okay? Fantastic. Then, of course, remember also you have your microphone on you. So you can kindly just remove your microphone and place it behind your seat. Then you can walk over to the podium and make the case for us this morning. I think because for convenience sake, we have David Ngaruiya, who is actually next to the lectern. So I'll call upon you to just walk over to the lectern and, of course, begin talking to Kenyans. Why you think this is a way or not the way to go? The church and self-regulation is a topic at hand, and I've mentioned that. You can head over to a Twitter handle, which is AM Live TV. AM Live TV is a profile name on Facebook. And right now on the lectern we have David Ngaruiya. Professor Ngaruiya is a lecturer at the International Leadership University. Ngaruiya, you have minutes. 5 minutes? 6 minutes, I should say, beginning now.
Thank you very much, Debarl. First of all, I really do need to appreciate the church because without the church, this nation would not be where it is. The church has actually been the bedrock of our democracy. It is the church that has fought hard and long for our democracy. I'm not saying that there are no other bodies involved. There are, but the church stands out in that area. But I also want to say that actually the principles that govern the church are the same principles that have been the foundation of the government that we have. Because our law, which has a Judeo-Christian history, is anchored on principles of the church. And so when we are talking about the church, let us remember that we are really talking about the history of our nation, the history of our society, and the body that has stood that we may have the kind of democracy that we enjoy today. And so as we begin to talk about whether for or against regulation of the church, let us remember who the church is. And by nature, for now, I only want to mention 4 aspects of the church, and then I will make my case. First of all, let's understand that the church is actually a self-governing, a self-sustaining, a self-propagating, and a self-theologizing body with accountability to society and with a view to transformation of society. And therefore, as a self-governing body, the church has already got its own mechanism on how it runs. Every church has got its own form of government. And that government is actually detailed in the registration of any church in this country. Because the way the church is governed is actually a requirement for a church to be registered. The church is also self-sustaining. In other words, people have a voice in the way that the church runs as an aspect of society. And the church is about people, men, women, and children. It is about the marginalized. It is about empowerment. And that is what society needs. The church is also self-propagating. In other words, it's supposed to be salt and light that spreads across society. It's not supposed to be a kind of exclusive club. No. It is supposed to permeate entire societies and, in fact, the world. And therefore, it is a body that is open. And lastly, and this is where we have a lot of problems, the church is self-theologizing. And this means that it's not just the leaders who consider the issues that we face and address those issues. It means that everyone, the youth in the church face issues. Old men and old women in the church face issues. So do children. So do the middle-aged. And those issues should be addressed using a value system based on scripture and tradition of the church. And therefore, as we talk about the church and whether we should regulate it or it should regulate itself, let us remember how far we have come. And let us remember what the church has meant to the world. Let us remember what it has meant to our democracy. Let us remember what it has been to the empowerment of men and women in our country, in institutions such as hospitals, such as schools, and even some of the very places where we live. Now, with that in mind, of course, in a democratic nation such as ours, accountability and transparency is necessary. And my case is, let us have a negotiated self-regulation of the church. Because we already have mechanisms in place, and what we need to examine is how effective have those mechanisms been, and where they have not been effective, let us strengthen them. And with that, and knowing, as I have said, that the church is self-governing, it is self-sustaining, it is self-propagating, it is self-theologizing, I rest my case that we can have a negotiated self-regulation of the church.
Thank you. Professor David Ngaruiya there, speaking quite movingly indeed this morning, making the case for the church and the self-governing or the self-regulation. And of course, he's teased out a lot of things as far as the church is concerned. First of all, it is self-governed, it is self-propagated, theologized and self-sustaining. And these are some of the issues that we'll be actually speaking on as well much later. So he says that this should be a negotiated self-regulation of the church. So it shouldn't just be one particular party, but they should come to the table and have a negotiation as far as regulations is concerned. We want to hear also from Professor Kombo, who will walk over now to the lectern this morning and also give us a speech this morning on what he thinks about the church and also the self-regulation bit that we're discussing this morning if you're joining us. Professor Kombo, we have 6 minutes beginning now.
Thank you so much, Debarl, and good morning, everyone. The question of the church and self-regulation, of course, as we opened up the talk this morning, is a matter that has come to us, and is a matter that we must ventilate on. We must be able to look at it and be able to answer that question. The way I want to approach this is, first of all, to say that the church has committed itself to many things. The church says many things about itself. For instance, the church talks about justice. The church talks about righteousness. The church talks about the society living in harmony. Everybody in the society must be in harmony with each other, and many such things. The moment you get into a space like that and make certain demands, and then you are seen as the one that holds that as a position, you invite yourself to a scrutiny. And I think this is where we have this debate. Having then examined that, how do we then progress? How then do we move forward? And I want to say that the moment we commit ourselves to certain things, and that is really what preaching is about, we invite scrutiny. And scrutiny is not bad. I don't want to say that is a bad thing. And I don't really see why anybody should fear scrutiny. This is something that I think on the basis of who we are and on the basis of what we have claimed, it is important that we take that as a given as far as I'm concerned. But we also need to understand that there's a history to the presence of the church in this society. The church, obviously, and Professor Ngaruiya has very well put it, has contributed immensely to the growth and to the development of the society. You can't be talking about the school system in this country. You cannot be talking about the hospital, systems in this country. You can't be talking about issues such as agriculture and so forth in this country without making reference to church. In fact, historically, when the missionary arrived, there were three things within the mission station. There was a hospital, there was a little garden where some form of agriculture was happening, and there was a formal school. So you cannot talk about the church and the society in this country without talking about the church and the contributions that it has made to the development of this country. Now that contribution is immense. It's so immense that when you begin to try to crowd that out by bringing some of the little things that happen, then again certain things do not appear to be working well. But it is also important for me to indicate that certain things might have gone wrong in the process of propagation and in the process of the multiplication of the church into the many denominations that we see today. Certain areas certainly have not gone, well. From this studio, we have discussed groups that might have appeared to have veered off, and without naming any group, and that certainly is not the way to go. We know places where some misuses have happened. We know places where maybe the use of funds and how to account for them may not have happened the proper way, where relationships might not have gone well, and we expected it to go the other way. And these, dark spots, here and there. Now, this does not necessarily need to be approached from a high-hand angle. I think this needs to be approached from the place of individual responsibilities on these registered organizations. Because if by any chance there's a church group that is functioning in the country without registration and all that, then it's upon the government system to be able to put up processes and structures that would track groups like that down and work with them towards registration and so forth. But to put together a whole process of reworking all these things because you have 2 or 3 groups that might not have worked well is actually to be able to be, is actually to be heavy-handed. So the position that I'm advancing here is that the church has done a lot. The church has all along been regulated, both externally, from the external forces, but also from the internal forces. But it is also important to indicate that even as those have happened, the regulations have happened, we have had obvious areas and obvious situations where things have not happened well. My submission is that where things have not gone on well, the church, the society, through the government, has obvious structures and systems that it could use to ensure that correction is in place in as far as those areas are concerned. That's my put.
Thank you, Professor James Kombo, the Vice Chancellor of Daystar University. And he says, of course, the position he's submitting is the church is regulated, both externally and internally. It has always been, and we'll tease out also some of the things with our panelists that he's raised, some of the salient points that we've actually picked out from his submission this morning. Walking to the podium is Bishop John Warari from the Inter-Religious Council of Kenya and also the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, EAK, and also is going to submit to us his thoughts about this particular debate that now is on. And I can see also a rush of tweets coming through. I shall be reading them before we take a short break this morning. Let's hear from Bishop Warari. Good morning, and you have 6 minutes.
Good morning. I'd like to say this is my maiden speech on this platform, and I'm forever grateful. I would like to begin by saying there is an act, or rather something we call Magna Carta, that was enacted in the year 1211, where all people, that was in England, are said that they are equal under the law. And there is this question that the church should be regulated. And as I submitted before, and I want to reiterate, is that the church is over-regulated. The church actually is a watchman. The church has a prophetic mandate to deal with moral issues and ethical issues. And the church exists as the light and as the salt of the world, and we must preserve that purpose. Our friend Professor Ngaruiya has told us who the church is, and indeed I agree with him. And I come from an umbrella body called EAK, Evangelical Alliance of Kenya. And in this umbrella body, there are regulations. And we submit ourselves to those regulations so that we can be on the right track. I would like to say the church should keep the main thing, the main thing. When the church sidetracks and gets into other businesses, that is where the trouble begins. So our core purpose is to watch over this nation, to watch over this country. We speak to the people, the word that God has given to us. And I recall our late Bishop Okulu, he wrote a book that was entitled, Let the Bishop Speak. Today, I want to say, let the church speak. The church should speak to herself. And the question is, do we have anomalies and do we have some issues in the church that should be amended? And the answer is yes. Indeed, the church should be transparent. The church should be honest so that it can keep its moral mandate. The church should also speak to the government. I wonder why actually many people in the government are uncomfortable about the church. It is our mandate to speak to the government. When things are going wrong, we should say it like it is. Last month we held an anti-corruption conference in Bomas of Kenya. And we were about 11 sectors that included the media. And I want to say the media is doing a good job because even this platform is provided by the media. And we had the academia, we had the trade union, we had the women and the youth, and we spoke to ourselves. And we would say that the church has the mandate to speak and to speak to the people loud and clear. The church is also speaking to the world. And we are telling the world there is hope. We are telling the world that if they can have internal conversation with themselves, if they can look inside, like the prodigal son who went wasting, and he reached a point, he came to his senses, and he changed his mind and went back home. So indeed, the church should continue with this mission. We have divine mandate. And I would like to caution and say that the church should not be a punching bag. The Bible says, touch not my anointed, do my prophet no harm. Even when we are scrutinizing the church, we should approach the church with reverence, because they are God's tool into this world. I would like also to say that as we think about regulations, we should not have these regulations as punitive. We should work together. The Bible says clearly, let us come and reason together. If there be a matter, if there be one or two rotten apples in the bag, we cannot say that the church wholesale is should be punished. So we are having a process as the church of self-cleaning, and I think this nation should be patient with the church. What we have in this nation is that as a whole, when we looked at the issue of corruption, we discovered it has permeated all the sectors, and we felt we should be easy on ourselves. We should look at where the snake is and go for the snake. We should not be out for what we call blame game, pointing fingers. The Bible clearly says that we should look at the log in our eye before we look at the speck in our neighbor. I would like to conclude in saying we have more than enough regulations. What we should do is to follow the regulations that are already there, and will be home and dry.
Thank you. Thank you, Bishop John Warari of the Inter-Religious Council of Kenya, and also the EAK, that is Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, right? He says that the church is speaking to both itself and the world. The question is, what is the narrative that is telling the world as well? And what is the world telling the church? Maybe this interface is what we need to explore as well. We'll take a short break, but I'll be remiss if I don't read one or two tweets as we take a short break. It's 7 on the nose right now. We have Mercy Kivuti. She's saying it should happen very soon. That is the self-regulation. Also, we have Situma here. That is going to try and get it clear. We have Laudo Soliloquy. Loud soliloquy saying, yeah, of course, it will help maintain the integrity in the church, because churches haven't been able to regulate themselves to avoid shepherds who feast on the herd in different ways. Also, we do have Chris Lebo saying they should not only be regulated, but many of them be banned. Some even claim they've resurrected the dead. That is Chris Lebo. His sentiments there. We have Richard Nyawila Okata saying the mainstream churches should be left alone, but the upcoming ones should, because they are the ones coming up with mysteries and questionable acts and doctrines. Also, we have John. Where is John? He says no. Yeah, him is very pointed. Also, we have Moses saying long overdue. This is Moses Giduga. Long overdue preaching in this Kenya, preaching in this Kenya has turned to be a modern conmanship. Also, we have Robert Osigwari saying, yes, so much cause conmen have turned churches into economic activity. In fact, it should be done Rwanda way. In Rwanda also, they actually put some of the churches through the grid and re-registered afresh many of the churches. We have also Charles Mutai Ngaruiya saying, now that churches have turned into business entities, they ought to be regulated just as any other business. And we have Paul Otieno Onyango saying, good morning, Debarl. As a Catholic priest, my take is simple. Yes, religion has been commercialized through the rhetoric of the gospel of prosperity, and the problem seems to be compounded in the upcoming churches other than the old religions. That is what Paul Otieno is saying. And we can lastly also read from Gidua Wakoine saying, watching from Bahati, Nairobi, we really do appreciate you this morning. And also, it's my brother saying, I'm watching from Busia. Busia is watching. Where are you watching from? Also, let me know. Thank you for your sentiment. We take a short break. Your sentiments, we take a short break right now. When we circle back, we continue with the discussion. We'll hear from Reverend Geoffrey Njenga, who is a professional accredited mediator and a clergy at the All Saints Cathedral as well. So don't go away. Much more coming up. Welcome back. You're watching the Leadership Forum, and we're using for subject this morning the church and self-regulation. We've heard from our speakers this morning, and now we're up to the last one. This is Reverend Geoffrey Njenga, who is a professional accredited mediator, also a clergy at the All Saints Cathedral, and is going to give us also his piece of the slice, what he thinks about the church and self-regulation. Geoffrey, I should say.
Good morning.
Good morning. You have 6 minutes beginning now.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I think it has been said that the church has done a lot of good things in this country. Nobody can contradict that, because it is true. The church has done many, many good things. However, the question the church ought to be asking itself, why then does anybody think that the church ought to be regulated? And the simple answer, and it has come over the break as we read the reaction from the people, Kenyans know that something has gone wrong. And I think it would be not very wise for the church to hide behind the pillars of the cathedral and wherever else we are and say we are okay, because Kenyans know we are not okay and something needs to be done. Now, if we don't do it, of course, we are going to lose that legitimacy that we know we do have. Now, on the question of regulate or not regulate, I am for self-regulation. I would propose self-regulation. I believe it's the best option, and the reason for that is because self-regulation comes from the heart. I should also say this, there's nothing new about rules. The church is actually about rules. And we shouldn't therefore get agitated or get excited if somebody says that we need to have rules, because every organized church has rules. And the question is, are we following them? You see, without rules, people tend to extreme behavior. And people need to be brought together to understand that rules is part of human life. And we need to have that. Even in the ideal situation, which was the Garden of Eden, there was also, don't do this, and you can do this. And you know, obviously, left on her own, Eve and her husband tended to do the wrong things. The church is the heart of the nation. And I beg to differ that we should therefore, or we should treat the church gently. I don't think we should. Because if we treat the church gently and it veers off, as it has done by and large, I think we'll be losing what is called, the nation will lose the moral compass. And generally, it is agreed that the church has lost its voice. In the 70s, in the 80s, when the church spoke, the government listened. It doesn't seem to work that anymore. And I believe it's because the church is chipping on its own integrity. And we are pointing fingers at people who are doing the wrong things and being very gentle on ourselves. I personally think it's time to be very hard on ourselves. If the father in a home chooses to veer off, what does he expect of his children and that entity or that unit called the family? If the church wants to gain its voice, we need to stand firm and do what is right. How that happens can be debated, but it needs to be done. And people need to understand there's no difference between those who are thieving in the name of the government and those who are stealing in the name of the church. If we are going to point fingers at anybody, we better point a stronger finger on ourselves. In any case, they say if you point one finger at someone, 3 of them are pointing back to you. I am not persuaded that the splinter groups which have become very popular in the church are motivated by the good of the ministry. I'm not motivated. We've seen people rise from nowhere and become extremely rich in our midst. Do we really want to encourage people to steal, to kill and to destroy in the name of religion? Something needs to be done. I mean, taking advantage of vulnerable people, and that is what Kenyans know, that is what they have come to understand, that most of the splinter groups are taking advantage of helpless, vulnerable members of the society, is simply not acceptable. Whether that is done by the church or it is done by the state, I think the church ought to even have a higher voice telling everybody we can't afford to do that. And hiding behind the Constitution, hiding behind anything that we may want to pick is not clever, because we are destroying ourselves as the church. I think we need to be at the forefront to say we need to make things work. If we are asking the government to make things work in this country, why should we not make it work? After all, we are the light and we are the salt of the earth. And we need to be even harder on those among ourselves who are not doing that. Now, the constitutions the world over have borrowed largely from the Bible, the Ten Commandments. We are the custodians of the Ten Commandments. Why are we not making it work? I think it's our job to enrich the church, to strengthen the church, so that when I stand and speak, people listen. But if they do have questions about my integrity, if they have questions about me and the way I'm doing things, where do I get the moral ground? Where do I get the moral standing to then be able to claim to be the salt of the earth? So let's not hide ourselves behind anything. Let's agree things are not working. At least Kenyans know. We may not know, we may not even want to accept it, but the man in the street, the woman in the street doesn't want to know about what we have done or what we have not done. They know that things are not working and they ought to be working. And that is not meant to be a global condemnation. I said at the beginning, good things are happening, but then good things did happen, and they ought to continue happening so that we do have a strong society. Now, I'm therefore looking for what? I'm looking for a middle ground. In fact, we should see whoever came up with the bill as a friend and say, give it to us, let's have a look, let's sit and reason together, because we have a common purpose, I want to believe. We want to make the church stronger. We want to make this country stronger. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend Geoffrey Njenga. And Muturi Kigano, he's the one who came up with this particular pronouncement. I don't think it's yet a bill, or he's actually seeking to either use a bill or move a motion in Parliament as far as this is concerned. And we'll be reaching out to him in a moment. He cannot be able to pick up his call right now, but we'll actually also seek his mind, pick his brains on what is behind this particular pronouncements from him. But we can also see some of your reactions here on social media. Gili Kowech says the church should give a direction to the government, and the government should also give the church a platform to execute its role in society. Marcos Mwenyewe says, yes, many pastors are just enriching themselves by manipulating congregation in the fake spiritual gymnastics. We should go run away on churches. And Drone also says, Drones on Twitter, it becomes difficult to infer any reverence because the church leaders themselves are more wolves than godly. Unfortunate. Those are your reactions on social media. Also, our numbers will be up momentarily for you to call in, ask questions, or to share your contributions as far as this is concerned. Let's hear from what the laity have to say out there, and the clergy are here as well, and also people from the academia. We have Vice Chancellor of Day State University, and also we have Professor David Ngaruiya, who is a lecturer at the International Leadership University, and also we do have with us Bishop John Warari, who is from the Interreligious Council of Kenya and Evangelical Alliance of Kenya as well. And you've heard from Geoffrey and Njenga this morning. So let's talk about this now very candidly. The issues of governance deeply unravel what we do know as far as this is concerned. We can begin with you, Ngaruiya, because you mentioned that the church is... something has gone wrong? Oh, your microphone. Yes, my microphone. Right, I'll fix that for you, don't worry. Right, so the church is a bedrock of our democracy, it says. You say, actually.
Yes.
Could we elucidate more on this so that we can get to truly understand? How is the church the bedrock of our democracy?
Yes, thank you very much. You see, if you look at the values that human beings cherish, you know, for example, holding people to matters of integrity, for example, matters of a clear conscience, you will find that actually it is the biblical values that shape what holds human beings together. There is a niche and a yearning in each human being to see that things are right. Of course, there is also a bent for evil, unfortunately. But then there is also a yearning to see order a yearning to see, as Professor Kombo mentioned, justice, a yearning for harmony, a yearning for unity. And that can only happen in a democratic society. And actually, when we go back to human history, we will actually find that it is biblically derived values that have formed the basis of democratization around the world. It is actually the church that is the bedrock of society. But as I say that, it's also because the church has also gone through very difficult times in its history. There was a time a lot of heresies surrounded the church, and they're there in the open. There were heresies on what it meant to belong to God. And people would actually pay a price. They would pay for indulgences so that they could be identified with the family of God. That's a church heresy. And it's been dealt with. And so we can actually draw a lot. And it is actually those lessons that led to the formation of democratic societies. What we have forgotten right now is that the church in Africa, particularly the church in Kenya, is the envy of the world. And the place we are finding ourselves struggling and we are addressing right now is a place that the church has taken centuries to address. And so we do have a golden opportunity, and this is the aspect of self-theologizing. I liked what the bishop said at the beginning, because he said the society is, society is dynamic. And what that means is that there are issues today that the church yesterday did not face. There are issues we are looking at. The young people are raising questions of, what does it mean to be a good leader today? Where does the model of leadership, where does my model of leadership come from? What does good sound worship like? What is wholesome music? These questions have been asked in the past, but as the society needs today, the church needs to address those things so that it can be relevant, but relevant anchored on values of a democratic society. And so there's a sense in which we forget that our democracy and the church are linked. But let's remember that the church is the mother itself of the very democracy that we enjoy.
Yeah, but if the church be the epitome then of democracy, how come we see, especially most of our churches today, they take some of the issues to court, right? Because they cannot see eye to eye. And I think even from the Bible, it is recommended that first you solve the issue in-house before you even go to the heathens and the courts, so to speak, as they put it in the Bible. Maybe you can clarify on this, the epitome of democracy, yet we don't see democracy in churches. We say the church should be the epitome of leadership, yet we've seen some of the great leaders have failed dismally when it comes to leadership. We can even remember now, or even recently, what has happened to the global summit leadership. The person who came up with this particular vision that we'd normally have this global leadership summit, this is Willow Creek's pastor, Bill Hybels, right? After so many years of actually being the icon of coming up with the church structures and coming up with, how you connect church governance, he fell, from that pedestal, and because of moral failure as well. We're grappling, and this is what Njenga is saying, that we have a problem. And let's admit that as a church, we do have a problem, and we should not just be putting this veneer, but where is this problem emanating from? He says
I have news for us.
We should be very hard on ourselves, right?
Yes,
hold on to that news.
Be.
Hold on to that news. Let's hear from Professor Kombo.
Okay.
Thank you. I think Professor Ngaruiya has mentioned a very important thing, and he has anchored his contribution on the idea of democracy. And of course, as you're regulating the talk, this came up. You cannot talk about democracy without thinking Christianity. If you are to look at the history of the United States of America, for instance, the foundations of that Constitution were not just Christian, but very evangelical in terms of its orientation and focus. Even the very progressive constitution of South Africa was quite derived from scripture and the scriptural principles in a lot of areas. That, of course, does not go without saying that, and I said it earlier, that Christianity has put itself on a pedestal. That pedestal requires that it be scrutinized. And it's a good thing to be asked to account, to be asked to give account of how you live and how you conduct business and how you do things. Now, and it is good for us because with proper scrutiny, then we are being asked nothing strange. We are being asked to do just what the Bible mandates us to do, just what the Bible asks us to do. Right now, in terms of demographics,
yes,
Christianity, we are told, has become a major religion in the southern part of the world. But when we look at this nation, again, you look at demographies and so forth, Christianity is way above 80% in terms of what the statisticians tell us. What we are hearing people saying, and that is the responses that you have read up here, are basically telling us, please, can we convert those numbers into the real Christians that the Bible is telling us? Is it possible for the church to do the work of discipleship, getting these people that have said yes to Christ and making them real disciples, then move them into spaces and into areas where they would do and where they will live in a manner that ultimately points to the satisfaction of the respondents as we are seeing them here this morning. So I think that's a challenge. So we should not look at those responses as necessarily negative. I don't want to do that. I want those responses to be seen as very positive contributions. The people are saying, church, you have placed yourself on a pedestal. The pedestal that you have put yourself in or on has the following requirements and expectations. We expect you to use that platform to look at yourself and put in activities, programs, engagements, and so forth that will ultimately bring you to the place where you should be.
Right. And I think before we come to you, Geoffrey, let's say from Bishop Warari, you'd actually, maybe I should ask you pointedly about the Interreligious Council of Kenya, the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, and many other bodies like the National Council of Churches as well that we do have in the country. This as sort of all the idea behind this particular councils was to self-regulate. So is it that now we don't have so much coming from this particular councils that someone else will actually come up with an idea of, regulating the church, and this should be anchored in law? What is the problem? Is it that we don't have an interface or a concrete body that really speaks for the church? The question will be that Njenga had raised earlier. Have you lost your voice?
Thank you, Debarl. I want to start by saying we have not lost our voice. We are speaking. We have been speaking. Right now, there is a technical working group in Ufungamano.
Yes. And
I'm a member. And on Monday, we shall meet with the senior religious leaders of these formations in the same place, Ufungamano. It's called Dialogue Reference Group. And last year, we held what we call National Dialogue Conference at Ufungamano.
Yes.
And we had identified issues that are bringing concern in this nation, and we are addressing them. We started with the National Dialogue Conference, and now we are going down to the counties. Has the umbrella bodies failed in their mandate? The answer is no. The umbrella bodies are alive, and in fact, as I said, we have entered into a memorandum of understanding with EACC, and when we held the conference, anti-corruption conference in Bomas of Kenya, because I'm a member of the steering committee, we even offered ourselves for scrutiny from the EACC office, that let it begin with us. As I said, religious organizations are dynamic, and if we have one or two of our members that may be going the wrong way, I believe we can handle as an umbrella body. We are speaking to them and we are calling them back home. Some organizations actually in the Interreligious Council, they even deregister, they recall the licenses of these ministers if indeed they have subscribed into the membership of these umbrella bodies. So I want to believe that the organizations, the umbrella bodies, they are doing their work and they are continuing, and we would pray that they continue doing it. And about the new regulations that are proposed, I want to repeat, they are not new. In fact, I received a copy of the same. They are saying, number one, that the religious leaders should be subjected to code of conduct scrutiny, and that is okay. They are saying that there should be a register of members of congregation. They are saying that there should be transparency, there should be audited reports, and that has been happening, so there is nothing new. But why I said we should not be hard and we should not be punitive to the religious organizations is because this is a family, and if something is wrong with a member of the family, we don't deject that person. We discipline them and we show them the way lovingly, and that is what it should be. And so Debarl, I believe the umbrella bodies, NCCK, and we've worked so very closely with NCCK. SUPKEM, we've worked so closely with the Muslim fraternity. And all these, including the Seventh-day Adventist and the rest, the OIC, we have internal mechanism of salvaging any situation. Like you've asked whether the Christians should take one another to court, they shouldn't. And that should be the last resort. So I want to believe that we should strengthen these umbrella bodies, strengthen them if there be any one that is wanting, and follow the regulations. And indeed, should we like when God gave the 10 commandments to the Hebrew nation, the Hebrew nations could not even keep the 10, but they went ahead and multiplied the law to over 600. And they messed themselves up until God, through Jesus Christ, gave a way of redeeming mankind. And how did he do it? He condensed the over 600 rules and regulations, commandments, into 2. Which one are they? That you should love the Lord your God, your sustainer and your creator. And number 2, love your neighbor, the golden rule. So if we follow after that, and I'm very happy what Professor spoke about, discipleship. Our mandate is to go out and preach the gospel. And from the inside, somebody is convicted and repents. From there, we bring him or her to church, we disciple them so that they can follow after Christ. We Christians, we follow after Christ. They should love God, they should love their neighbor, and other teachings that we are going to help them along the way.
Right. Thank you. Let's hear from Reverend Njenga. You had something to say before I ask
yes,
my question.
I think I agree with the assertion that we are a family. And this family is doing many good things. And the church, like I have said, is doing very many good things. And we have good people. But the church is not being wrecked by those who are doing the right things. And that should not be gainsaid, that we have good people, because that's true. The church is being destroyed by those who are doing the wrong things, and we need to do something about that. You know, if in this family we allow people to run away, splinter groups, and begin to do everything they want to do out there, we lose control of those people. So much as we want to do the right thing, we have people there who are doing the wrong things. You see, the ministry of Jesus Christ, the public ministry of Jesus Christ here on earth, focused very sharply on religious leaders. And he was not soft on them at all, and for good reason. They were representing the kingdom, but in the wrong way. And he did not mince words. He called them hypocrites. He called them brood of vipers. He called them all manner of things. And the reason is simply the ministry was in their hands. The discipleship we are talking about, they were supposed to be doing that. Being the salt and the light of the world, they are supposed to do that. So he was actually ruthless. And I think, much as I do not want to insist that that there's that the church hits the state hits the church unfairly, I think there's room for saying you did well. We want you to do better, and we want you to move on better ground. You know, discipleship, which to me is the heart of the ministry, is not about democracy. Discipleship is about one person who decides to be different and help others. And the ministry is really not about democracy. The ministry is about discipleship. The ministry is not about elections. The ministry is about discipleship. And if you look right from the 12 that Jesus Christ brought on board, Jethro and Moses and Paul and Timothy and all those people, leaders were discipled to take over leadership. If we push the democracy thing, we lose the heart of the ministry. I'm not saying we shouldn't be democratic, but we need to be careful about that. So what is the church looking for? The church is looking for that one person who will do the right things. Now, the other thing that we need to realize, which I believe the President of the Republic of Kenya has realized, is that Kenyans are impatient with things going the wrong way. And for a long time, we have talked about corruption. I can see him in the forefront, and I commend him for discovering that Kenyans are impatient. Kenyans are impatient with the church for continuing to do whatever it is that they are doing and going the wrong way, because they are watching. You see, they really don't care about what the rules and regulations and these things we are doing. They want to see a leader they can emulate. I want to emulate my bishop. I want to emulate my leader at whatever level.
Thank you.
If that's not happening, there's a problem.
All right. Reverend Kombo had earlier said that we invite scrutiny. And I just want to play as a clip of Ekeza, and we know the story of Ekeza. Everyone believes you know, the church and the leader, and of course they normally say the religion is the opium of the masses, but look at how frustrated, and they're taking special umbrage at the church right now, because many of their monies, around 7 billion shillings, just went down the tubes. Here's a reaction yesterday.
Hiyo ndio pesa tunamdai David Kariuki Gare na Ngaruiya Real Estate Limited ambayo ilichukuliwa bila idhini na sio kwa njia halali. Ile assets mnaambiwa saa hii ati zinatakiwa ziuzwe ndio mrudishiwe pesa yenu. Zile zilinunuliwa na pesa ya nani? Yenu.
Ngaruiya arudishe pesa ya wananchi. Yeye ni mwizi, anafaa kuwe gerezani.
Na tena tulikuwa tumeambiwa tukuja mapema, tuandikishwe. What? Nini tena unaandikishwa? What? For what purpose? Na wako na vitabu.
So that is just a frustration from some of the church members that they came up with a circle, which is purely a church circle, and now the money has gone down the tubes. They're frustrated Kenyans. It reminds me of the story of David and Uriah. And you know, that particular narrative, I think I'll speak to it much later. But you had said the issue of inviting scrutiny, and I think let me just hold up on that particular thought for now, because I think Ngaruiya had stopped you at some point. I can't quite remember what had stopped you at.
Yes.
Yes. If you pick up on that, then we move on with the conversation.
Yeah, I believe Reverend Njenga has addressed that to some extent.
Okay.
But I wanted to actually say this. There is an epidemic in the church. There is an epidemic of rogue preachers, an epidemic of opportunists, an epidemic of cults that brainwash people, and an epidemic of people looking for hope from the wrong sources. And if we don't take urgent action, this is only going to destroy the testimony of the church and our society. And unfortunately for the church, and I must say this as somebody who belongs to the church, there is a known cure, but the church neglects this to a large extent. It's not the entire church. Some churches know the cure. And the cure is actually solid theological education. If you look at the skills, at the knowledge, and the values of rogue preachers and ministers and of opportunists, you will be amazed and wonder if a pilot needs to be qualified so that you can be sure that when they are in the air with you, you are safe. If a driver needs to be licensed so that you know when they are on the road, you're safe with them. If a teacher needs to be licensed so that when you entrust our children to them, we know that they are qualified. Why has the church neglected theological education? Why hasn't the church said, this is the kind of theological education we need so that we have the knowledge, we have the skills, and we have the values to change society? That is where the urgency is. And I'm actually calling on the church to remember that this epidemic is not going to go away unless the church is willing to take the cure. And the cure is solid theological education that already exists. And what the church needs to do is to strengthen it, to change it where necessary, but that is its medication.
Professor Kombo, I think he raises a good point. When it comes to doctrine, it comes to some of theology that we can hear being spewed out by some of his preachers as well. Does it mean that the church has been sleeping as a watchdog, of course, with the counsels that we have so far? How come we never call out on these rogue preachers and address the issues that maybe the preaching that the erroneous preaching that actually they're spewing from their pulpits, right? Because we know some of these people, if we look at maybe even the West, like for America, in a case in point will be when we had someone like Reverend Carl Pearson, right, who turned around and said there is no hell after years of preaching that there is hell, and said no, it is just a figment of imagination, there is no hell, right? That one actually challenged the tenets of the doctrine in the Bible, and he had to come before even the Council of Bishops, who wanted to really know, I mean, where is it coming from? We know the tenets of the Bible is this. Why are you now deviating from what the canons of the scriptures are saying? Why aren't the churches in Kenya calling out people who, they have erroneous preaching, and ask them about their doctrine, where is the teaching coming from? There is no sort of vetting that is happening. Anyone can preach anything. Open up, you just switch on your televisions, and you'll hear some weird preachings that they're not in tandem with the scriptures.
Yeah. Thank you. I think Professor Ngaruiya has said it very emphatically, and I would want to rephrase it. In the history of the church, what made a major difference at the time of the shift of a number of the Roman pagans becoming Christians was what they called the first duty of a bishop. The first duty of a bishop within that context was theologizing, working not just among the clergy and with the clergy, to raise their understanding of and their engagement in theologizing. But bringing that at the level of the local church and to individuals, that is what I had earlier on called discipleship. Where this has not happened, you have a Christian who is heavily exposed. This person, and that's where we get our 80% of the population, has said yes to Christ. But beyond that, they have not been moved to a place where they can theologically stand the challenges and the tests. And therefore they are gullible. Any person who comes to them in the name of a shepherd or in the name of here is a scriptural teaching will basically just, turn them around. A great part of the New Testament talks about the Antichrist's coming. And the Antichrist was not going to come necessarily from outside. And so even as we look at the churches and the groupings and the individuals who are emerging, we cannot, and I think we should not be naive to just sit there and think that we are not dealing with the Antichrist situation here. We could be dealing with some bit of that. And so we need to not only watch our backs and call out, we need to go back and be able to think very, very strategically and seriously about theology. But as we do that, we need also to heed to the warning of Christ that we could be dealing with a situation where, Antichrist is also at play. Now, if you look at 01, you would recall this group in Uganda. I think it is somewhere within the central part of Uganda, where hundreds of people were burnt to death because a group that was calling itself Christian had told them to sell their land, had told them to bring all the money to the leaders, had told them of a day when they would go to heaven in a chariot of fire, and that all of them would actually go to heaven on that material day. And of course, on that day, we had over 100 people losing their lives to fire because of people who had calculated and did everything in place to rob these people of their land, of their money and everything, and eventually, kill them in that manner. Up to today, it is not known where the leaders of that group went. Whether they also perished in that fire or not, nobody knows. Now, were these people out there with the message? Yes, they were out there with the message. What message were they out there with? I think that is what this scrutiny is about. We could be having groups of people in our midst calling themselves ministers, but they are actually wolves in a sheepskin.
All right. So
and that is something we need to watch.
So many people are saying, should we go the Rwandan way, where many of these churches were vetted, and some of them were not really found to be, credible, and they were deregistered? Do you think the government should take that measure? Should we wait for the government to actually come and intervene and vet the churches?
I think that is what I was calling scrutiny. And there's no reason why anybody should fear it.
You invite scrutiny?
Yes.
Okay.
There's no reason why you should fear it.
Let's hear from a bishop.
I'd like to agree with my professor here and Professor Ngaruiya. He said that the answer is in theology, in training our people, because we are entrusting them with lives. This is a profession, and this is a calling, and the Bible clearly says in the book of Timothy that we should study to show ourselves approved to God and unto man, so that what we are delivering should be wholesome. And like the evangelicals, we have the Park University, And I'm very happy that just last week, the International Leadership University held a discourse on theology, and we participated. We came in and listened, and in fact that is the way we should go, that we should help our people to know the basics, because if you give a bus to a rogue driver, he's going to cause accident, and you know the aftermath. But yet, Debarl, my problem here is we have learned people who are evil. For example, we have lawyers who are very well trained, and they are rogue. So even as we are thinking about training our people, we should walk with them closely. And that is why I still emphasize that the umbrella bodies should be empowered so that they can recall, even recommend the registration of any wayward preacher. It's unfortunate that, like my good professor has mentioned, that we are living in the last days, and there is the issue of the Antichrist. Has he already come in? Is he in the sheep's cloth? Is he among the preachers that we are seeing in the streets and all that? One time, Debarl, I had a problem with the police. I was arrested and taken to the very highest office, to a police commissioner. And he told me that in my congregation there are evil people, and while the police are following after these thieves, they would shoot innocent Kenyans. And I told the commissioner that we are actually doing the same job like he is doing. The difference is he is running after the thieves with a gun, and if he shoots, the culprit dies, and I'm running after the thief with the Bible and with the gospel, which is the power of God unto salvation to everyone who would believe. So when I shoot a thug, instead of his dying, he will live with the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. So there is the power of the gospel, and we should train our people from the word God, just like you are seated here, Debarl, because you are a seasoned journalist. You did not come to this office without papers, and for that, congratulations. The same, we should encourage our people to go to school. But I would want to say, if you read the Bible again, which is the word of God, you will discover that the disciples were unlearned. They had not gone to any school. And they learned on the job as they continued preaching. There was a council in Jerusalem that would help keep the doctrine straight. And so we should also be cautious again, because Debarl, tell me, if I preach to somebody in the streets and he receives Christ and he has the calling to go about preaching the gospel, and it's discovered this man was a thug, should we doubt his call? No. What we should do is to bring him up in the ways of God. Paul was actually a murderer when he was called Saul. He was persecuting the church. But he met with the life changer, whose name is Jesus Christ.
Thank you.
And he was changed from Saul to Paul. And he became the greatest theologians that we have around. But if you look at his history, actually he could not qualify for a good conduct certificate because of his past. So I want to say the gospel transforms. The gospel is the power of God unto salvation.
Thank you.
Theology, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's hear from Geoffrey, even as we prepare our headline thoughts. Geoffrey.
Calling is a very personal thing, and we've talked a bit about calling. And God calls whoever he wills. And it is really not for me to argue, and this has been perhaps one of our biggest problems, because I can claim I am called, and you cannot argue with that because the calling is personal. It is not for me to doubt someone's calling or even to endorse it, because that's a personal thing. But you see, I do have the right to judge what I see coming from that individual. And as we talk about helping, growing with people, first, if Paul insisted that he will continue to be a murderer. He was not going to be useful in the kingdom of
Yes.
God. He was willing to allow himself to be taught. The 12 disciples were not learned, but they allowed themselves to sit at the feet of Jesus for 3 years. Do we have people who simply say they are called and they want to simply have a blank check to go there and mess the work of Jesus Christ here on earth? I think that while we may not doubt the calling, or we are not necessarily judging the calling, we should be able to scrutinize the fruits and have a system that tells someone this is not the fruit of the calling that you claim to be. Now, I like the fact that we are saying we need proficient people to run the church, and that's a given. If I start a business today, I'm not going to look for a failure somewhere who was not able to do anything with their life. I'll look for someone who is very well trained, someone who can do the work that needs to be done. I think it is not very clever, and it is not very wise for the church to then be a place where anybody who has failed everywhere comes, and that has, you know, it was brought to my attention at some point. Someone walked into my office and told me, I have failed in everything. I failed my O-level, I have failed my A-level. I believe God is calling me into the ministry. And I told him, please don't touch it. If you have failed in everything, be very careful to tell anybody that he's calling you into this now because you have failed. God wants people who are proficient. We are entrusted with the souls of human beings. And that is a delicate thing that calls for a lot, much more even than theological learning. Yes, that, and wisdom and knowledge about dealing with people.
Right, thank you. We have a caller who's hanging on the line. We can just be able to take one as we're winding up right now. Let's just hear what he had to say, a question or a contribution. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Nyakaya. Good morning. How are you, Nyagaya?
Not bad.
Yeah, you have a question or a contribution? Keep it kindly, very briefly.
I wanted to have a contribution to what you are discussing.
Please.
I've been listening very keenly, and I do agree with Professor Ngaruiya that in any situation for you to succeed, you must have basic training. But unfortunately, most of the churches, let me call it the small churches, I sometimes call them the push churches, when people will practice on the streets, after a few days they build a church. After a few days, sometimes you find them telling you, send money, do this, God talks to me, to you through me, which is not proper. Even though Paul changed, not all people can change. That was an old situation. Now that the schools are there and the institution is there, churches must make institutions where people could be trained to have the basic knowledge of how to preach, so that they can know how to translate the Bible.
Thank you.
That's what I was trying to.
Thank you, Nyagaya. Thank you for that comment. And of course, also our closing remarks from Professor David Ngaruiya. 20 seconds, actually.
Okay. You know, the church is the custodian of human conscience. And right now, the world is looking at Africa and our country, Kenya, because Christian values have been embraced. Yes, we have our problems, we have our weaknesses, but let's remember that the center of gravity of human conscience has moved to our region, and the world is looking to us. And I'm inviting the church to strengthen theological education in this country and in the continent of Africa in shaping that human conscience. And as a result, we will have a better society.
Thank you, Ngaruiya. Let's hear from Professor Kombo. Briefly, 20 seconds.
Going back to where we started, should we self-regulate, or should some regulator from outside come and work with us? I think both. We need both. As I have said right from the start, that the moment we go public, we subject ourselves to external scrutiny as well as internal, and this is part of it. Yes, Christianity is about instructions, and because Christianity is about instructions, you look at Paul. Paul did 13 letters. The others, maybe 1 or 2, But as that happened, you can ask anyone.
Thank you.
Who was Paul?
Thank you. Let's leave it at that. 20 seconds are over. Let's hear from Bishop John Warari, briefly.
Yeah,
20 seconds.
I want to believe that there should be a lot of discussion before we come up with rules and regulations. Let it be between whoever is setting these rules and the church. The church should not be left behind. Secondly, I've heard Mr. Ngaruiya speak about small churches and bush churches. Jesus also started very small, with a very few people.
Thank you.
And we are what we are through small churches. And then finally, the Barclays Bank began from a pastor's house, Pastor Barclays. What we have today as a Barclays Bank was something that was started small, and it grew as it was regulated, and it was helped to grow.
Thank you.
Same.
Finally, Geoffrey.
I think we've done well as a church. What I would want to advise against is us getting too excited because someone has said we need to be regulated. I think we need to see ourselves as co-laborers and pick whatever is there. If it enriches the church, so be it. So we ought not to be agitated and scream at each other. Let's come and reason together.
Thank you. Let's come and reason together, and that's what we've been doing this morning. Thank you, Reverend Geoffrey Njenga, who is a professional accredited mediator. Also, Bishop John Warari, who is from the international, or that is the Interreligious Council of Kenya, I should say, and Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, EAK. We want to thank you also, Professor James Kombo, who is the Vice Chancellor of Daystar University, and also Professor David Ngaruiya, who is a lecturer at the International Leadership University. We really do appreciate your input this morning. Just one or two tweets as we are winding up. We have Shadrach Musau saying, "Let me refresh your memory, sir. If you really know anything about the good book, these days were predicted to have to pass before the second coming. My tech teach folks how to learn and be knowledgeable to avoid being duped." We have also Daniel saying the government should do more than just registration. There was a legislation that was being prepared by the AG. What happened to it? Maybe it's time we have it in place. And finally, I think we need to understand that priesthood or pastorhood is a call from God, hence can never be a profession like any other. It is all labor discipleship. In this sense, it will be quite difficult for the state to control the churches. Thank you for your tweets. Many of them are coming through. But I want to thank you also nonetheless for contributing. If I've not read yours, I'll read some of them also next time with a different topic as well. But thank you for your contribution. Living with Us is up next.